The Arizona desert was silent except for Eleanor's ragged breathing. She pressed her hand against her stomach, feeling the secret that would destroy her. 3 months pregnant, unmarried, ruined. When Cole Harrison found her lost in the darkness, she knew this was the moment. The moment he would reject her, despise her, walk away. Her voice shook as the words tumbled out. "I'm with child, your child." She braced for anger, for disgust, for the look that would confirm her worst fears. Instead, Cole dropped to one knee in the desert dust, and he smiled. "I've been hoping you would," he said. What happened next would change not just their lives, but an entire town. This is the story of how a cowboy's 5 words became a 50-year legacy. This is the story of Eleanor and Cole Harrison. The gunshot echoed across the Arizona desert like the crack of God's judgment. Eleanor Hayes pressed her hand against her stomach, feeling the secret that lived there, the secret that would destroy her if anyone discovered it. 3 months. 3 months since that night by the creek when everything had changed. 3 months of fear eating at her insides like a cancer. The moonlight cast long shadows across the sage and Joshua trees. She had been walking for hours now, though she had no clear memory of leaving the boarding house in Kingman. Mrs. Patterson's voice still rang in her ears, sharp and accusing. The whispers at the general store. The way people looked at her now, their eyes sliding away when she met their gaze. Another shot rang out closer this time. Eleanor stumbled, her boot catching on a root. She went down hard, her palms scraping against rough ground. For a moment she stayed there on her hands and knees, breathing hard, tasting dust and fear. The desert stretched out in every direction, endless and indifferent. She was lost, completely, hopelessly lost. And she was not alone. The sound of hoofbeats reached her slow and steady, a horse picking its way through the darkness. Eleanor scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs. Cattle thieves, she thought. Everyone in Kingman knew they'd been working this area for weeks. They'd shoot her without hesitation if they thought she'd seen their faces. She pressed herself against the boulder, trying to make herself small. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. Then a voice cut through the darkness. Deep, measured, familiar. "Miss you all right out there." Eleanor's breath caught in her chest. She knew that voice. She knew it better than she knew her own heartbeat. For 3 months she had been praying to hear it again. For 3 months she had been terrified of what she would say when she did. She turned slowly, her hands trembling. Cole Harrison sat astride a bay gelding, silhouetted against the star-scattered sky. Even in shadow she could see the breadth of his shoulders, the way he held himself in the saddle, with an easy confidence that came from a lifetime on horseback. He was still 30 yards away, but she could feel the weight of his attention on her like a physical thing. Eleanor opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came out. 3 months of rehearsing this moment, and now that it was here, every word had abandoned her. Cole nudged his horse forward. As he drew closer, the moonlight caught his face. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, eyes the color of summer grass, though in this light they appeared nearly black. There was a new scar above his left eyebrow, a white line cutting through the tan of his skin. He looked thinner than she remembered, harder, the way a man looks when he's been living rough on the trail. Eleanor. Her name on his lips nearly broke her. She had imagined it so many times during those long nights at the boarding house, lying awake while Mrs. Patterson snored in the next room. But imagination was nothing compared to reality. Nothing compared to the way his voice gentled when he said her name, like he was handling something precious that might shatter if he wasn't careful. Cole. It came out as barely more than a whisper. He swung down from his horse in one fluid motion and closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. Up close, she could see the dust on his clothes, the stubble on his jaw. He smelled of leather and sweat and something indefinable that was purely him. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" His hands hovered near her shoulders, not quite touching, like he wasn't sure he had the right. "Those shots. Cattle thieves working this area. It's not safe." The concern in his voice made something crack inside her chest. Safe. When had she last felt safe? When had her world been anything other than a tightrope stretched over an abyss? "I was walking," she said. The words sounded stupid even to her own ears. "I needed to think. I got lost." Cole's eyes searched her face. In the moonlight, she could see him taking inventory, the tear tracks on her cheeks. the way her hands were shaking, the desperate edge to her breathing. Think about what... His voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. What's wrong? Everything. Nothing. How could she even begin to answer that question? When did you get back? She asked instead, her voice cracking. About 3 hours ago. He studied her face like he was trying to read a book in a foreign language. Went straight to your boarding house. Mrs. Patterson said you'd gone for a walk. I've been searching for you. 3 hours. He'd been back for 3 hours, and he'd come looking for her. Eleanor felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. I missed you, she said, and the words felt like pulling a knife from a wound. Every day you were gone, I missed you something fierce. Cole's face softened. I missed you too. Every night on that trail, all I could think about was getting back to you. You could have written. I did write 3 letters. His jaw tightened. Did you not receive them? Eleanor stared at him. I received nothing. For a moment, Cole said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly, a sound like a man who'd just had a puzzle piece click into place. That explains why you didn't write back. I thought perhaps you'd changed your mind about us. About me. Changed her mind. The words were so absurd, Eleanor almost laughed. Changed her mind about the only man who'd ever looked at her like she was worth something. The only man who'd ever listened when she talked about books and ideas, who hadn't tried to make her smaller, to fit into some predetermined box. Changed my mind. She shook her head. Cole, I've thought of nothing but you since you left. I counted the days. I hoped and prayed you'd return safely. Then what has you out here crying in the desert? The question hung between them like a blade. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading and longing for in equal measure. She could feel her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. Her hand moved almost of its own accord to rest against her stomach. Cole's eyes followed the movement. She saw something shift in his expression, a question forming. No, she had to say it, had to get the words out before she lost her courage entirely. I'm with child. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Your child. The words seemed to echo in the desert silence. Eleanor watched Cole's face, trying to read his reaction. Shock, anger, disgust, she couldn't tell. He'd gone very still, that his expression unreadable in the moonlight. I've known for certain about 6 weeks now, she continued, the words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. Though I suspected before that, I was so afraid to tell you. I know we're not married, and I know this will ruin my reputation, and I know you might not want this. But I needed you to know, because I can't hide it much longer, and I don't know what to do. She was crying again, hard sobs that shook her whole body. 3 months of fear and shame and loneliness pouring out at once. She expected Cole to step back, to put distance between them, to look at her the way Mrs. Patterson looked at her, like she was something dirty that needed to be scrubbed away. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands. His palms were rough with calluses warm against her skin. When she finally managed to meet his eyes, what she saw there made her breath catch. He was smiling. I've been hoping you would, he said. Eleanor blinked. The words made no sense. What? I've been hoping you would. Cole's voice was thick with emotion. I've been hoping you'd tell me you're carrying my child. I've been hoping you'd give me a reason to ask what I've wanted to ask since the first time I saw you. He dropped to one knee right there in the desert dirt, still holding her hands in his. Eleanor Hayes, will you marry me? Will you make me the happiest man in Arizona and be my wife? The world seemed to tilt sideways. Eleanor stared down at him, this strong, silent man kneeling in the dust, his eyes shining in the moonlight. You want this? Her voice came out as barely a whisper. You want the baby. I want everything with you. His voice was fierce now, certain. I want to marry you proper in the church in Kingman, with the whole town watching. I want to build you a house with enough rooms for all the children we might have. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to watch you grow round with our baby and be there when the child comes into this world. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. I've wanted all of this since that night by the creek, but I thought I should wait, court you properly, save more money. But if you're carrying my child, then there's no reason to wait another day. Eleanor felt like she couldn't breathe. For 3 months she'd been carrying this terror inside her, convinced that when Cole found out, he would reject her, that he would look at her with shame or disgust, that her secret would destroy everything. Instead, he was looking at her like she'd handed him the sun and the moon and all the stars besides. "You're not angry," she managed. "Angry?" Cole shook his head. "Eleanor, I'm grateful. I'm blessed beyond measure. I was terrified during those weeks away that I would come back and find you had moved on, found someone more respectable, someone educated like you. Instead, I come back to find you carrying my child, and it feels like a gift I don't deserve." He stood up, pulling her close. Eleanor buried her face against his chest and felt something inside her begin to unknot. The fear that had been her constant companion for weeks was loosening its grip. In its place was something she'd almost forgotten the shape of. Hope. When she finally pulled back enough to look at his face, she found him watching her with such tenderness it made her chest ache. "Say yes," he said softly. "Please say yes." "Yes." The word came out strong and clear. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to everything." Cole let out a whoop of joy that echoed across the desert, then swung her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and crying at the same time. When he finally set her down, he immediately dropped back to his knees and pressed his ear gently against her stomach. "Can you hear anything?" Eleanor asked, running her fingers through his hair. "Not yet, but I will." He looked up at her, his eyes bright. "In a few months, I'll be able to hear our baby's heartbeat, and it will be the most beautiful sound in the world." He pressed a kiss to her stomach through the fabric of her dress, then stood and pulled her close again. "We need to get you back to town and out of danger. Those cattle thieves are getting bolder." As if to punctuate his words, another gunshot rang out in the distance. Cole lifted Eleanor onto his horse, then swung up behind her, his arms secure around her waist. "Hold on tight," he murmured against her ear. Then they were riding hard toward Kingman, the desert night rushing past them in a blur of shadow and moonlight. Eleanor leaned back against Cole's solid chest, feeling safer than she had in months. Eventually, curiosity got the better of her. "You said you wrote me 3 letters. What did they say?" She felt him smile against her hair. "The first one was mostly about the trail, the work, how much I missed you. The second one was longer. I told you about how I've been saving money, how I'd already talked to Henry Morgan about buying that piece of land south of his ranch. I told you I was building something, trying to make something of myself, so I could offer you a real life. And the third letter," his arm tightened around her, "the third letter was the hardest to write. I told you I loved you. I told you I had loved you from the moment you corrected my grammar in the general store and then apologized for being presumptuous. I told you I knew I wasn't good enough for you, but I was going to spend the rest of my life trying to be. And I asked if when I returned you would let me court you properly with the intention of marriage." Eleanor felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. "I never received any of them. I thought you had forgotten about me." "Forget you, impossible." Cole's voice was low and intense. "You're burned into my heart, Eleanor. There hasn't been a moment since I met you that I haven't carried you with me." They rode into Kingman as the church bells were tolling midnight. The streets were mostly empty, just a few late-night patrons stumbling out of the saloon. Cole guided the horse past the boarding house where Eleanor had been renting a room. But instead of stopping, he kept riding. "Where are we going?" Eleanor asked. "To the preacher's house. We're getting married tonight." "Tonight, but Cole, it's the middle of the night. We can't wake Reverend Matthews at this hour." "We absolutely can, and we will." His voice was firm. "I'm not spending another night without you as my wife. Not now that I know you're carrying our child. It's not proper, and more than that, I don't want to wait. Do you—" Eleanor thought about her small, lonely room at the boarding house. She thought about all the nights she had lain awake, worrying about the future, about how she would tell Cole about whether he would want her and their child. And now here he was saying he had been hoping for exactly this offering, her everything she hadn't dared to dream of. "No," she said firmly, "I don't want to wait either." Reverend Thomas Matthews was understandably bewildered when Cole pounded on his door at midnight, but he was a kind man who had known Cole since he was a boy. When Cole explained the situation, or at least the parts that were necessary to explain, the Reverend's wife bustled around finding witnesses while the Reverend himself pulled on his coat over his nightshirt. Within the hour, Eleanor and Cole were standing in the small church saying their vows. Mrs. Matthews had pressed a handful of wildflowers into Eleanor's hands, and someone had lit the candles at the altar. In the flickering golden light, Cole looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I, James Cole Harrison, take you, Eleanor Rose Hayes, to be my lawfully wedded wife. His voice was steady and sure. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and provide for you all the days of my life. I promise to be a good father to our children and a good husband to you. I promise that you will never doubt my love or my commitment. This I swear before all and these witnesses. When it was her turn, Eleanor's voice shook with emotion, but she got through the vows, promising to love and honor him, to stand by his side, to build a life with him. And when Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her with such tenderness that Mrs. Matthews had to dab at her eyes with her handkerchief. They signed the marriage certificate, and Eleanor stared at her new name, Eleanor Harrison. She was a married woman now. She was Cole's wife. And instead of the shame and fear she had been carrying for weeks, she felt only joy. Cole had a room at the small hotel on Main Street, and that was where they went, climbing the stairs hand in hand. Inside, he lit the lamp and then turned to her, suddenly looking uncertain. Are you truly all right with all this happening so fast? I didn't give you time to plan a proper wedding or invite anyone. Your family doesn't even know. Eleanor set down the flowers and took his hands. My family is in Boston, and we haven't been close since I moved west. They thought teaching school in Arizona was beneath me. They'll probably think marrying a cowboy is even more beneath me, but I don't care what they think. I love you, Cole. I have loved you for months. And yes, everything happened fast tonight, but it feels right. Doesn't it feel right to you? It feels like coming home, he said softly. It feels like everything I have been working toward my whole life just fell into place. She reached up and touched the new scar above his eyebrow. How did this happen? Ornery steer, it's nothing. Everything about you is something to me. She traced the scar gently. I want to know every story, every detail. I want to learn every part of you. We have time for that now. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. We have the rest of our lives. He kissed her again, and this time there was no reason to hold back, no reason to stop. They were married now, bound together, legally and spiritually. When he carefully began unbuttoning her dress, his hands were gentle, reverent. I won't hurt you or the baby, he asked, hesitating. No, the doctor said everything is fine as long as I'm careful. You saw a doctor. He paused, looking at her. When what? Last week, I wanted to be certain before I told you. Well before I tried to figure out how to tell you. He finished unbuttoning her dress and slid it off her shoulders, his eyes never leaving her face. You must have been so scared going through this alone. I was terrified, she admitted. I didn't know what you would say or do. I didn't know if you would want this. I feared you would think I had trapped you. Trapped me. He cupped her face in his hands. Eleanor, you have freed me. Before you, I was just going through the motions of life, working and drifting, and not really living. You make me want to be better, do better. You make me want to build something lasting. And now we're going to have a child together, and I can't think of anything more perfect. They made love slowly, carefully, Cole treating her like she might break, murmuring words of love against her skin. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow hotel bed, her head on his chest, his hand resting protectively on her stomach. When is the baby due? He asked into the darkness. Early March, the doctor thinks. Maybe late February. That gives us about 5 months. Enough time to build a house and get everything ready. You're truly going to build a house. I already started. He sounded almost shy. That's part of why I took the job driving cattle north. The pay was good and I needed the money for materials. The land is already mine. I bought it 6 months ago, right after I met you. I knew even then that I wanted something permanent, something real. I wanted to have something to offer you. Eleanor propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. You've always been enough, Cole. You've always had something to offer me. Your land, your house, your money, none of that matters compared to your heart. You deserve the world. I might not be able to give you that, but I can give you a good home and a good life. I can give you my complete devotion. I can give you honesty and loyalty and love that will never fade. That's all I've ever wanted. She kissed him softly. Just you. Just this. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in weeks, Eleanor slept without nightmares, without fear, without the weight of her secret pressing down on her chest. Morning came, bright and clear sunlight streaming through the hotel window. Cole was already awake, watching her with an expression so full of love that it made her breath catch. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison," he said, and she could hear the joy in his voice. "Good morning, husband." She smiled up at him. "How are you feeling? Any regrets?" "Not a single one." He brushed her hair back from her face. "How about you?" "Sickness. Not too bad this morning. It comes and goes, usually worse in the early morning and late evening." "What can I do to help?" "You're already doing it. Just being here, that's everything." They dressed and went down to breakfast at the hotel dining room. Several people stared at them, clearly curious about why Cole Harrison and the school teacher were having breakfast together at the hotel. By noon, the whole town would know they had married. The thought might have worried Eleanor yesterday, but today she wore her new status with pride. After breakfast, Cole took her to the general store. "You need a proper wedding ring," he said. "Something that tells everyone you're taken." The selection was limited, but there was a simple gold band that fit her finger perfectly. Cole also bought her a warm shawl, new gloves, and insisted on getting fabric so she could make herself new dresses as she grew with the baby. "You don't have to buy me all this," she protested even as she ran her fingers over the beautiful blue calico. "I want to. Let me do this for you." His eyes were pleading, and she realized how important it was to him to be able to provide, to take care of her. "All right, thank you." They spent the rest of the morning walking around Kingman Cole, introducing her as his wife to everyone they met. Some people were surprised, others looked disapproving, but most offered congratulations. By afternoon, word had spread to the school board. Eleanor received a visit from Mr. Henderson, the chairman. His tone was formal and cold. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, his tone making her new name sound like an accusation. "I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. The school board has voted, and we cannot have a married woman teaching. It wouldn't be proper, especially given your condition." Eleanor felt her face flame with embarrassment. "How did you know about my condition?" "Mrs. Patterson from your boarding house mentioned you had been ill in the mornings. She put two and two together when she heard about your sudden marriage." His expression was stern, judgmental. "You understand this puts us in a difficult position." Before Eleanor could respond, Cole stepped forward. "My wife will not be needing the teaching position any longer. She'll be busy running our household and preparing for our child. Thank you for your time, Mr. Henderson." He steered Eleanor away before she could say anything else. Once they were out of earshot, he turned to her. "I know you love teaching. I'm sorry." Eleanor was surprised to find she meant it when she said, "It's all right. I did love teaching, but I love this more. I love being your wife. I love that we're going to have a family together. The teaching was just a job. This is a life." "You can always teach our children," he said with a smile. "And maybe when they're older, if you want to teach again, things will be different." They collected Eleanor's few belongings from the boarding house, Mrs. Patterson watching with pursed lips and disapproving eyes. Eleanor ignored her, focusing instead on packing her books, her clothes, and the few personal items she had accumulated during her time in Kingman. "Is this everything?" Cole asked, looking at the two small trunks that contained her entire life. "I didn't bring much when I came from Boston. I wanted a fresh start." "Well, you've got that now." He lifted the trunks easily. "Come on, I want to show you something." They rode out of town, heading south, the afternoon sun warm on their backs. After about 30 minutes, Cole guided the horse off the main road onto a smaller trail. They crested a small rise, and Eleanor gasped. Spread out before them was a beautiful valley, green with grass despite the Arizona heat, with a creek running through it. And there, near a stand of cottonwood trees, was the beginning of a house. The foundation was laid, and the framing had started enough that she could see what it would become. "This is ours," she breathed. "All ours. 40 acres of good land, water rights to the creek, and plenty of room for cattle. I've been working on the house every spare moment. With your help, or at least your supervision, since you shouldn't be doing heavy work in your condition, we can have it finished before the baby comes." Eleanor slid down from the horse and walked slowly toward the house frame, trying to imagine it completed. "How many rooms?" "I planned for 4. A main room for cooking and living, a bedroom for us, and 2 smaller rooms for children. But I can add more if you want. The design is flexible." "It's perfect." She turned to face him, tears in her eyes again. Happy tears this time. "You built this for me, for us, for our family." He joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. I know it's not much yet, but it will be. I promise you, Eleanor, I'm going to build you a beautiful home. It might take time, but I'll make this place everything you deserve." She leaned into him, looking out at the valley, at the creek sparkling in the sunlight, at the wide blue sky overhead. "It's already everything I deserve, because you're here, because we're together." They spent the rest of the afternoon walking the property, Cole pointing out where he wanted to build the barn, where the cattle would graze, where Eleanor might plant a garden if she wanted. He showed her the creek, which was deeper than it looked, with clear, cold water that came down from the mountains. "It never runs dry," he explained, "even in the worst heat of summer. That was one of the reasons I wanted this land. Reliable water is everything out here." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they sat together under the cottonwood trees, Cole's arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "I can't believe this is my life now," Eleanor said softly. "Yesterday I was terrified and alone. Now I'm married to the man I love, and we're sitting on our own land planning our future together. It feels like a dream. It's real. I promise you it's all real." He kissed the top of her head. "And it's only going to get better." Sunday morning dawned clear and bright over Kingman. Eleanor woke in Cole's arms at the hotel, feeling for the first time in months like she could breathe without the weight of fear pressing down on her chest. They dressed quietly, Cole's movements careful around her as if she might break. "We should go to church," Eleanor said, adjusting her new shawl. "People need to see us together, as husband and wife." Cole nodded, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Reverend Blackwood won't be pleased." "Let him be displeased. We've done nothing wrong." They walked through the quiet morning streets to the small white church that stood at the center of Kingman. People were already gathering, dressed in their Sunday best, conversations stopping mid-sentence as Cole and Eleanor approached. Eleanor felt the weight of their stares, heard the whispers that followed in their wake, like the rustle of dry leaves. Inside the church, the pews were filling quickly. Cole led Eleanor to a seat near the back. She could feel eyes on them from every direction. Mrs. Patterson sat 3 rows ahead, her neck craned around to get a better look, her mouth pursed in disapproval. Mr. Henderson, the school board chairman, sat stiff and proper near the front, refusing to acknowledge their presence. But there were friendly faces too. Dr. Fletcher, an older man with kind eyes and silver hair, nodded to them with a warm smile. And across the aisle sat Ruth Morgan with her son Sam, a serious-faced boy of 7 with his father's dark hair and his mother's gentle eyes. Ruth gave Eleanor a small, encouraging smile. The church bells rang, their sound echoing across the valley. Reverend Marcus Blackwood emerged from the vestry and took his place at the pulpit. He was a tall man in his mid-50s with iron-gray hair and eyes like chips of flint. His presence commanded attention, demanded respect. For 20 years, he had been the moral authority of Kingman, the voice that shaped public opinion and private conscience. He opened his Bible and looked out over the congregation. His gaze swept across the pews and stopped when it reached Eleanor and Cole. Something flickered in his expression, cold and hard. "This morning," Blackwood began, his voice carrying easily through the small church, "I want to speak to you about the story of Jezebel, about the woman who brought corruption and false worship into the kingdom of Israel, about how one person's sin can poison an entire community." Eleanor felt Cole stiffen beside her. She reached for his hand and found it clenched into a fist. Blackwood continued, his voice rising with righteous fervor. "Jezebel was a woman who led others astray, who brought shame upon herself and all who associated with her. And what did the people of Israel do? They allowed her to remain among them. They tolerated her presence, and because of that tolerance, they all suffered." The church was silent. Eleanor could feel every eye in the room shifting between Blackwood and her, putting together what he was saying without saying it directly. "We must be vigilant," Blackwood said, his hands gripping the sides of the pulpit. "We must guard against those who would bring sin into our midst, those who would corrupt our values and lead our children astray. This town has always stood for decency, for morality, for proper Christian behavior. We cannot allow that to change. We cannot allow the fallen to drag down the righteous." Cole stood up. The sudden movement drew every eye in the church. Eleanor grabbed his arm, but he gently pulled free and stepped into the aisle. Reverend Cole's voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. "If you want to speak about me and my wife, speak plainly." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. I'm speaking about principles, Mr. Harrison, about maintaining the moral fabric of our community. My wife and I are legally married. We were wed last night by Reverend Matthews in this very church. We've done nothing wrong. A murmur ran through the congregation. Mrs. Patterson's voice rose above the others, shrill with indignation. The timing of your marriage doesn't erase the circumstances that necessitated it. Cole turned to face the congregation. My wife is expecting our child. That's true. But Eleanor is my wife now, and she will be treated with the respect that position deserves. Anyone who has a problem with that can speak to me directly. Eleanor stood as well, her legs shaking but her voice clear. Reverend Blackwood speaks of sin and corruption. But I see a man standing before you who would condemn me for loving my husband, who would judge an unborn child before it even draws breath. Is that Christian charity? Is that the message of forgiveness and grace? Blackwood's face flushed red. You dare to lecture me on Christian doctrine? You who came to this town under false pretenses, presenting yourself as a moral example to our children while living in sin. I never lied about who I was, Eleanor said. I came here to teach because I love learning, and I wanted to share that with others. Yes, I made choices that others might judge. But I love my husband. I love the child we've created, and I won't apologize for that. The silence that followed was deafening. Then from across the aisle, young Sam Morgan stood up. Mrs. Harrison taught me to read, the boy said, his voice high and clear. She was kind to me when other people weren't. Why are you being mean to her? Ruth Morgan pulled her son back down, but not before several people had heard him. The question hung in the air, simple and devastating in its innocence. Blackwood's jaw worked. Sit down, child. You don't understand what you're speaking about. He understands perfectly, Dr. Fletcher said, rising to his feet. He understands kindness and cruelty. Perhaps we've complicated things that should be simple. Cole took Eleanor's hand. We're leaving. Anyone who wants to join us for Sunday dinner at the hotel is welcome. We'll be serving grace and acceptance instead of judgment. They walked down the aisle together, Eleanor's head held high despite the trembling in her legs. Behind them, she heard the scrape of pews. Ruth Morgan stood gathering Sam. Dr. Fletcher followed. A few others rose as well, men who had worked with Cole on cattle drives, women who had appreciated Eleanor's teaching. But most remained seated. Most chose to stay with Blackwood in his condemnation. Outside in the bright sunlight, Eleanor felt tears spilling down her cheeks. Cole pulled her close. I'm sorry, she said. I've made you an outcast in your own town. You've given me a family, Cole replied. That's worth more than the approval of hypocrites. Ruth Morgan approached with Sam. My husband Henry would have been here today, but he's minding the ranch. He asked me to tell you both that you have friends and you're welcome at our table anytime. Thank you, Eleanor managed. Sam looked up at her with solemn eyes. Are you really going to have a baby? Yes. Can I help? I'm good at helping. Eleanor knelt down to his level, ignoring the protest from her corset. I would like that very much. Dr. Fletcher joined them. Mrs. Harrison, when you need medical care, my services are at your disposal. No charge. It's the least I can do for someone who stood up to Blackwood's pomposity. Eleanor felt overwhelmed by their kindness. You'll lose patience for associating with us. Then they weren't worth having as patients. The old doctor's eyes twinkled. I'm too old to care about social politics, my dear. I care about right and wrong. And what Blackwood did in there was wrong. They ended up having Sunday dinner at the hotel after all. The group was small but genuine. Ruth told stories about homesteading with her late husband, about the challenges and joys of building a life in the territory. Sam peppered Cole with questions about ranching and horses. Dr. Fletcher shared tales from his medical training in Philadelphia, making Eleanor laugh with his dry wit. For a few hours, Eleanor forgot about the judgment in whispers. She felt for the first time since leaving Boston like she might have found a community. But as the afternoon wore on and people began to drift away, Cole's expression grew serious. What is it? Eleanor asked when they were alone in their hotel room. Blackwood, he's not going to let this go. What can he do? We're married. We've broken no laws. Cole sat on the edge of the bed, his elbows on his knees. He doesn't need laws. He has something more powerful. He has the ear of almost everyone in this town. The banker, the merchants, the sheriff. If he decides we're a problem, he can make life very difficult. Eleanor sat beside him. Then we'll face it together, like you said this morning. He turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face. I need to tell you something about why I understand what you're going through. She waited, giving him space to find the words. I was married before, he said finally. Her name was Sarah. We had a son, Jacob. He was 4 years old. Eleanor's breath caught. Past tense. Was married, had a son. What happened? She asked softly. Scarlet fever. It swept through 3 years ago. I was away on a cattle drive when it hit. By the time I got back, they were both already gone and buried. His voice was flat, emotionless, the way people sound when they're talking about pain too deep for expression. I should have been there. Should have gotten them to a doctor. Should have done something. Eleanor took his hand. You couldn't have known. That's what people said, but it didn't change the fact that they died alone while I was chasing money. He looked down at their joined hands. I swore after that I would never put work before family again. Never be absent when the people I love need me. Is that why you want this baby so much? Because it gives you another chance. Cole shook his head. I want this baby because it's ours. Because it's proof that life goes on, that love is stronger than loss. But yes, I want to do it right this time. I want to be there for every moment. I want to protect you and our child from everything I couldn't protect Sarah and Jacob from. Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder. You can't protect us from everything. Bad things happen. Disease comes. Accidents occur. All you can do is be present, be loving, and do your best. My best wasn't good enough before. It will be now because you're not alone this time. We'll face whatever comes together. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of shared sorrow and shared hope settling between them. The next morning, Cole took Eleanor out to see the land. They rode slowly, Cole pointing out landmarks and explaining his vision for the ranch. When they crested the rise and the valley spread out before them, Eleanor felt her breath catch again. In the daylight, it was even more beautiful than it had been at sunset. The house frame stood waiting, wood bones against the blue sky. Cole helped Eleanor down from the horse, and they walked through what would become their home. He showed her where each room would be, how the windows would face east to catch the morning sun, how the fireplace would be positioned to heat the whole structure. The Morgan's ranch is just over that ridge, Cole said, pointing north. Henry's offered to help with the building when I need extra hands. And Thomas Wright, a young ranch hand, said he'd be willing to work for room and board, plus a small wage once we have the house finished. You've thought of everything. I've had 6 months to plan. He smiled at her. Come on, I want to show you the creek. They walked through tall grass toward the line of cottonwood trees. The creek ran clear and cold, about 15 feet wide and knee-deep in most places. Cole knelt and cupped his hands, bringing water to his lips. Sweet and clean, never fails even in drought years. The previous owner didn't realize what he had sold the land cheap because the soil's too rocky for farming. But for cattle ranching, it's perfect. Eleanor was about to respond when a sound made them both turn. A young boy had emerged from the cottonwoods carrying a fishing pole made from a bent branch and some twine. Sam Morgan. The boy froze when he saw them, his eyes going wide. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to trespass. I was just fishing. It's all right, Cole said. Does your mother know you're here? Sam's face fell. She thinks I'm fishing in our creek. But all the good spots are on your land, and I thought maybe since you weren't living here yet, it would be okay, and then I promised I was going to ask permission once you moved in. The words came out in a rush. Cole looked at Eleanor, then back at the boy. How often do you come here to fish? Most days, Sam admitted, after my chores are done. And how often do you catch anything? 3 or 4 times a week. Mom makes the best fried trout you ever tasted. Cole nodded slowly. All right, here's what we're going to do. You can fish here anytime you want, but you need to tell your mother where you're going. No more sneaking around. And in exchange, you help me with some work on the house. Not the heavy stuff, but fetching tools, holding boards, steady things like that. Fair, Sam's face lit up like the sun. Really, you mean it? I mean it. A man's word is his bond, Sam. I expect the same from you. Yes, sir, Mr. Harrison, I promise. Eleanor watched the exchange with a warm feeling spreading through her chest. Cole with a child, patient and kind, giving the boy both discipline and grace. This was the father their child would have. Sam spent the rest of the afternoon with them, showing surprising knowledge about carpentry for a 7-year-old. His father had been teaching him before he died, Ruth had mentioned. The boy clearly missed having a man to learn from. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, Ruth appeared on horseback. Worry etched on her face. Sam, I've been looking everywhere. You said the creek. I thought you meant our creek. I'm sorry, Ma. Mr. Harrison said I could fish here if I asked permission and didn't sneak, and I helped with the house. Ruth looked at Cole, then at Eleanor, her expression softening. That's kind of you both. Sam's been at loose ends since his father passed. He needs work to keep him occupied. He's welcome here any time, Cole said. As are you. Ruth hesitated, then said, There's talk in town. Blackwood's been making the rounds speaking to the merchants and the banker. He's telling them that doing business with you would be supporting immorality. Cole's jaw tightened. I see. Henry and I won't stand for it. We'll help however we can. But I thought you should know what you're facing. After Ruth and Sam left, Eleanor and Cole sat under the cottonwood trees watching the light fade from the sky. He's going to try to destroy us, Eleanor said quietly. He's going to try, but we have something he doesn't. What's that? Cole pulled her close. We have each other. We have people who see past his self-righteousness. And we have the truth on our side. Since when does truth matter more than power? It doesn't always, but it should, and we're going to make it matter. The next few days proved Ruth's warning accurate. Cole went to the bank to arrange a loan for building materials and was turned away. Mr. Garrett, the banker, wouldn't quite meet his eyes. I'm sorry, Harrison. It's a business decision. Your circumstances have changed, and the bank feels it would be too great a risk. My circumstance, I've never missed a payment. My credit was good last month. Last month, you weren't married to a woman of questionable character. Cole's hands clenched. Watch your words carefully, Garrett. The banker had the grace to look ashamed. I'm just repeating what I've been told. Take it up with Blackwood if you disagree. At the general store, Eleanor found herself avoided by the other women shopping. When she approached the counter, the clerk served her, but with cold efficiency, none of the friendly chatter that had characterized her previous visits. Mrs. Patterson stood near the fabric display, speaking loudly enough to be overheard. Some people have no shame, parading around town like she's done nothing wrong. In my day, a woman in her condition would have the decency to hide herself away until after the wedding to at least pretend there was propriety. Eleanor's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high. She paid for her purchases and left without responding. That Sunday, the scene repeated itself. Blackwood's sermon was less direct than the previous week, but the message was clear. He spoke about maintaining standards, about not compromising with sin, about the importance of setting boundaries to protect the community. There are those who would say we should show unlimited tolerance, Blackwood intoned, that we should accept anyone and everyone regardless of their behavior. But I say to you that tolerance of evil is itself evil. Sometimes love requires us to draw a line to say this far and no further. Cole and Eleanor sat in the back pew again. This week only Dr. Fletcher and the Morgans joined them. The silence from the rest of the congregation spoke volumes. After the service, Blackwood organized a town meeting. It was held in the church basement, ostensibly to discuss the upcoming harvest festival, but everyone knew the real purpose. Cole and Eleanor attended. They sat in the back while Blackwood led the discussion from the front. The meeting covered festival logistics for 20 minutes before Blackwood shifted topics. There's another matter we should address: the moral character of our community. We've always prided ourselves on being a decent, God-fearing town. But recently, we've had individuals who seem intent on challenging those values. He still didn't name them directly, but heads turned. Mrs. Patterson spoke up. We should have standards. Children are watching. They're learning what behavior is acceptable. If we allow certain people to remain in good standing despite their obvious moral failures, what message does that send? I agree, Mr. Henderson said. The school board has already taken action regarding Mrs. Harrison's employment, but perhaps we should consider broader measures, such as, someone asked, social standards. If certain individuals choose to reject our values, perhaps they should find themselves unwelcome at community gatherings. We don't have to be cruel, but we can make it clear that Kingman stands for something. Eleanor felt Cole's hand find hers under the table. She squeezed back, trying to draw strength from his presence. Dr. Fletcher stood. I find this entire discussion distasteful. We're talking about ostracizing a young couple who have done nothing illegal and who, by all accounts, are trying to build an honest life together. Since when is love a crime? It's not about love, Blackwood said smoothly. It's about the order in which things should happen. Marriage, then children. That's the proper sequence. And yet, when they married, you condemned them for that too, Dr. Fletcher shot back. It seems there's no action they could take that would satisfy you, Reverend, which suggests this isn't really about morality at all. It's about control. Blackwood's eyes flashed. How dare you suggest? I dare because I'm old enough not to care about your opinion of me. Dr. Fletcher's voice was sharp. I've lived through enough pompous sermons to recognize hypocrisy when I see it. You're not protecting this community. You're bullying two people who've done you no harm. They harm us by their very presence, Mrs. Patterson insisted. They corrupt our standards. Cole stood up. The sudden movement drew all eyes. Reverend Blackwood, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the basement. If you're going to talk about my wife, use her name. Stop hiding behind vague references and moral pronouncements. Be honest about what this is. And what is it, Mr. Harrison? A campaign to drive us out of town. Because you can't stand the idea that someone might not bow to your authority. Because Eleanor stood up to you in church and you can't tolerate that. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Blackwood's face flushed. I have no personal vendetta against you or your wife. I simply believe in upholding standards. Then uphold them equally, Eleanor said, standing beside Cole. Search this room for anyone who's never made a mistake, never had a shameful moment, never done something they regretted. If you find that perfect person, let them cast the first stone. The biblical reference hit hard. Several people looked away uncomfortable. Young Sam Morgan stood up in the back, his voice clear in the sudden silence. Mrs. Harrison teaches me to read. She's nice to me. She doesn't yell or get mad when I make mistakes. Why are you being mean to someone nice? Ruth tried to pull her son back down, but Sam twisted free. Pa used to say that how you treat people when they're in trouble shows who you really are. Mrs. Harrison's in trouble and you're all being mean. That's not what Pa would do. The room went silent. A 7-year-old boy had said what many adults were thinking, but afraid to voice. Blackwood cleared his throat. Child, you're too young to understand the complexities of adult morality. I understand being kind versus being mean, Sam shot back. Cole put his hand on Eleanor's shoulder. We're leaving. Anyone who wants to talk to us can find us at our ranch. We'll be too busy building our life to attend meetings about whether we deserve to exist. They walked out, Eleanor's heart pounding. Behind them, she heard Ruth gathering Sam. Dr. Fletcher's footsteps followed. Outside in the evening air, Eleanor finally let herself breathe. That was terrifying, she admitted. You were magnificent, Cole said. Did you see Blackwood's face when you quoted scripture at him? Fletcher chuckled. I haven't seen him that flustered in years. Well done, both of you. Ruth apologized for Sam's outburst, but Cole shook his head. Don't apologize. That boy has more courage than most of the adults in there. He said what needed saying. They parted ways in the gathering dusk. As Cole and Eleanor rode back toward the hotel, Eleanor felt exhausted but oddly hopeful. Do you think we changed any minds? Maybe, maybe not, but we stood our ground. That matters. Over the next 2 weeks, the social pressure intensified. Merchants served them, but without warmth. People crossed the street to avoid passing too close. Eleanor felt eyes on her everywhere she went, judgment following like a shadow. But there were bright spots. Ruth brought food by the hotel twice a week. Dr. Fletcher stopped by to check on Eleanor's health, refusing payment. And Sam appeared at the ranch nearly every day after his chores were done, eager to help Cole with the building. The house was taking shape. With Henry Morgan's help and Sam's enthusiastic, if sometimes clumsy assistance, the walls rose. The roof went on. Windows were installed. Eleanor watched it all with wonder, seeing their home emerge from the skeleton of wood and stone. She was standing in what would be the main room, 6 months pregnant now, and showing clearly when the first scream cut through the afternoon air. Fire. Eleanor ran outside to see smoke billowing up from the direction of the Morgan ranch. Cole was already moving, shouting for Henry to get water, saddling horses. The entire valley seemed to be mobilizing. By the time Eleanor reached the scene, the wildfire had spread across half of the Morgan property. The grass was tinder dry from weeks without rain, and the flames leaped from bush to bush with terrifying speed. Men from neighboring ranches were already there beating at the edges with wet blankets, creating fire breaks. Women gathered in Ruth's yard, organizing water brigades and caring for children evacuated from the path of the fire. Eleanor immediately joined them, ignoring the looks some of the women gave her swollen belly. "We need more water buckets," she called out, "and someone needs to wet down the barn roof." Mrs. Patterson started to object, but Ruth cut her off. "Eleanor's right. We need every hand. This fire doesn't care about anyone's moral standing." They worked for hours as the sun set and darkness fell. The fire line crept closer to the Morgan house, closer to the barn where their horses were stabled. Cole and the other men were black with soot, their faces streaked with sweat, eyes red from smoke. Then Sam's voice rose in a scream. "The barn! Ginger's still in the barn." Before anyone could stop him, the 7-year-old boy was running toward the burning structure. Ruth screamed his name, but he was already through the door, disappearing into the smoke. Eleanor didn't think. She just moved, running after the boy. She heard Cole shout her name, but she was already at the barn entrance. Inside, the smoke was thick and choking. She could hear Sam coughing, calling for his horse. She found him struggling with a terrified mare's halter, the animal rearing and fighting. Eleanor grabbed Sam's shoulders. "Go! Get out, I'll get the horse." "But Ginger—" "Go!" Sam ran. Eleanor turned to the mare, speaking low and steady despite the roar of flames eating at the barn's far wall. The horse's eyes rolled white with terror, but Eleanor kept talking, kept her hands gentle but firm on the halter. She led the mare toward the door. Behind her she heard a beam crack, the sound of wood splintering. Then the ceiling gave way. Eleanor felt heat wash over her back. She shoved the mare forward through the door and stumbled after her. Someone caught her as she fell, pulled her clear of the barn. Hands beat at her dress where sparks had caught. She heard Cole's voice, frantic and close. Then darkness took her. She woke to Dr. Fletcher's lined face hovering above her. She was lying on the ground, Ruth's lap under her head. Cole knelt beside her, his face white beneath the soot. "The baby," Eleanor gasped. "The baby's fine," Dr. Fletcher said firmly. "You're fine, though you singed your hair and burned your hands. You need to rest." "Sam, safe, thanks to you." Eleanor tried to sit up, but Cole pressed her gently back down. "The fire, contained. The barn's gone, but the house is saved. Everyone's alive." His voice broke. "Including you, though God knows what you were thinking, running into a burning building while pregnant." "I was thinking about saving a child," Eleanor said. "The way you would have." She saw something shift in his expression. Pride and fear and love, all mixed together. Ruth was crying, holding Sam close. "You saved my boy. You saved him." Other women were gathering around now. Women who had avoided Eleanor for weeks. Mrs. Patterson stood at the edge of the group, her face unreadable. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," one of them said softly. "Or the most foolish," another added, but there was no malice in it. "She risked her life and her child's life to save Sam," Ruth said fiercely. "That's what kind of person Eleanor Harrison is, and anyone who can't see that is blind." The crowd dispersed slowly. Cole carried Eleanor back to the Morgan house, where Ruth insisted they stay the night. Eleanor's hands were bandaged and her singed hair trimmed where the fire had caught it. In the morning, they discovered someone had been at their ranch while they were fighting the fire. The house frame had been partially torn down. Support beams sawed through windows, broken tools scattered and damaged. Words were painted across what would have been their bedroom wall in crude black letters. "Leave." Cole stood looking at the destruction, his jaw working. Eleanor felt her heart sink. All their work, all their hope damaged in one night of malice. "Who would do this?" she whispered. "Someone who wants us gone. Someone emboldened by Blackwood's campaign." Cole's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. Sheriff McGraw arrived later that morning to investigate. He walked through the damage, taking notes, asking questions. "Any idea who might have done this?" "Someone who attended Blackwood's meeting about maintaining community standards," Cole said flatly. The sheriff sighed. "That's half the town, Harrison. I need specifics." "Then do your job and find specifics. This is vandalism. This is destruction of property. This is a threat against my pregnant wife. I'll look into it. But without witnesses or evidence, there's not much I can do. After the sheriff left, Cole and Eleanor stood among the wreckage of their partially built home. Eleanor felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. They want us to give up, she said. I know. Are we going to? Cole turned to look at her, his eyes fierce. No, we're going to rebuild. We're going to finish this house, and we're going to raise our child here. Because this is our land, our home, our life, and no one takes that from us. He pulled her close, and Eleanor leaned into his strength. Behind them, the valley stretched out beautiful and unchanged. The creek still ran clear. The cottonwoods still whispered in the breeze. And in Eleanor's womb, their child kicked a small, fierce reminder of why they were fighting. They would not be driven out. They would not surrender. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The morning after the fire, Cole found something in the ashes near their damaged house. A knife half buried in the dirt where someone had dropped it in their haste to escape. He turned it over in his hands, examining the carved initials on the handle. J.B. Jacob Barnes, one of Reverend Blackwood's most faithful deacons. Cole showed the knife to Eleanor, his face grim. I'm going to find him. Cole, wait. Let the sheriff handle it. The sheriff won't do anything, you know that. McGraw's too afraid of losing Blackwood's support. Eleanor grabbed his arm. Then let it go. We'll rebuild. We don't need revenge. This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure they know they can't terrorize us without consequences. He found Barnes at the saloon that afternoon drinking whiskey with two other men. When Cole walked in, conversations died. The room went quiet. Barnes, Cole said, you dropped something at my property last night. He tossed the knife onto the bar. It clattered against the wood, the initials clearly visible. Barnes's face went pale. That's not mine. I lost that knife weeks ago. Funny, it was at my ranch last night, right about the time someone was destroying the house I'm building for my pregnant wife. One of Barnes's companions stood up. You calling him a liar? I'm stating facts. His knife, my property, vandalism and threats. Cole's voice was deadly calm. Now either he confesses to the sheriff or I make him confess right here. Barnes's hand moved toward his hip. Cole was faster. He had his gun out and leveled before Barnes cleared leather. Don't, Cole said softly. I don't want to shoot you, but I will protect my family. Sheriff McGraw pushed her through the saloon doors. Harrison, put that gun down. After Barnes confesses. I didn't do nothing, Barnes protested, but his voice shook. Your knife says otherwise. The sheriff looked between them, his weathered face troubled. Barnes, if you've got something to say, now's the time. Barnes looked around the room, seeking support. He found only silence. Finally, his shoulders slumped. Reverend said we needed to protect the town. Said that Harrison and his wife were corrupting our values. Said someone needed to make them understand they weren't welcome. So you destroyed my property. We just wanted to scare you, make you leave. Cole's eyes narrowed. Who else? Barnes named two other men, both members of Blackwood's congregation. The sheriff took notes, his expression growing darker. You're under arrest, Barnes. Vandalism, destruction of property, terroristic threats. As McGraw led Barnes away, Cole holstered his gun. But he knew this wasn't over. Barnes was just a tool. The real enemy was still preaching from his pulpit every Sunday. That evening, Dr. Fletcher visited Cole and Eleanor at the hotel with news. I need to tell you something, the old doctor said, settling into a chair. About Reverend Blackwood, about his past. He explained that 10 years ago, Blackwood had a daughter named Mary. She had gotten pregnant outside of marriage. Instead of showing compassion, Blackwood had sent her away, told everyone she had died of illness, and forbidden anyone to speak her name. But she didn't die, Dr. Fletcher said. She's alive, working as a nurse in Denver. I've kept in contact with her over the years. She's a good woman who made one mistake and was punished far more harshly than she deserved. Eleanor felt something click into place. He condemned me because I reminded him of her, of his own daughter. More than that, he's terrified that if people know the truth about Mary, they'll see him as the hypocrite he is. Cole leaned forward. Can you contact her? Would she be willing to come back and tell the truth? I can ask, but she's afraid of him. He destroyed her once. She might not be willing to risk it again. Tell her she won't be alone, Eleanor said. Tell her we'll stand with her. Dr. Fletcher nodded slowly. I'll write to her. but it will take time for a response. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Cole hired help to rebuild the damaged sections of the house. Thomas Wright, a young ranch hand who'd been in the church the day Eleanor stood up to Blackwood, volunteered his labor in exchange for room and board once the house was finished. "What you did," Thomas told Eleanor, standing up to him like that. "My whole life I've watched Blackwood control this town with fear." Someone needed to say enough. The house rose again from its partial destruction. This time men stood guard at night. Henry Morgan and his crew took turns watching for vandals. No one tried again. Eleanor was 7 months pregnant, now moving more slowly, tiring easily. But she refused to be idle. She taught Sam and 2 other children who'd been brought to the ranch by parents who disagreed with Blackwood's campaign. Her small school met under the cottonwood trees, reading and arithmetic mixed with the sound of hammers and saws as the house took shape. Then the letter came. Dr. Fletcher brought it to them one evening, his hands shaking slightly as he passed it to Eleanor. "Mary's coming. She'll be here in 2 weeks." Eleanor read the letter, Mary's neat handwriting, describing her journey and her fear, but also her determination. "I've lived with shame long enough," Mary wrote. "If speaking the truth can help others, then I'll find the courage." But Blackwood had spies everywhere. Word reached him that Dr. Fletcher had been seen at the post office receiving mail from Denver. He put the pieces together quickly. 1 week before Mary was due to arrive, 3 men came to the ranch while Cole was in town buying supplies. Eleanor was alone except for Sam, who was practicing his letters at the kitchen table in the newly finished house. The men wore bandanas over their faces. One of them was tall and broad-shouldered. Another had a distinctive limp. The third was thin and nervous. "Mrs. Harrison," the tall one said. His voice was muffled, but Eleanor thought she recognized it. "We're here with a message. Leave Kingman by the end of the week or there will be consequences." Eleanor stood up from where she'd been kneading bread. "Get off my property. We're just delivering a message. And I'm delivering mine. This is my land, my home. You have no right to be here." The thin man pulled a pistol. "Maybe you need a stronger warning." Eleanor's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Shooting a pregnant woman? That's what you've become. That's what Blackwood's teaching you." The thin man hesitated. The tall one cursed and stepped forward, grabbing Eleanor's arm. Sam appeared in the doorway holding Cole's shotgun. The weapon was almost as big as the boy, but he held it steady. "Let her go," Sam said, his voice high but determined, "or I'll shoot." The men laughed. "Boy, you even know how to use that." Sam cocked the hammer. "My pa taught me before he died. And Mrs. Harrison's my friend. Let her go." The standoff might have ended badly if not for the sound of hoofbeats. Cole appeared over the rise, flanked by Henry Morgan and Thomas Wright. All 3 had guns drawn. The masked men ran for their horses and rode off before Cole could reach them, but Eleanor had been shaken badly. That night she woke from nightmares, her hand pressed to her belly where the baby kicked. Cole held her while she cried. "We can leave," he said quietly. "If this is too much, we can go somewhere else. Start over." "No," Eleanor's voice was fierce through her tears. "I'm tired of running. I ran from Boston. I won't run from here. This is our home, even if it means danger. Especially then, because if we leave, Blackwood wins, and the next person who stands up to him will face the same treatment. Someone has to draw the line." Cole kissed her forehead. "Then we fight, but carefully, smartly." Sheriff McGraw investigated the attack, but the masked men had left no evidence. He posted a deputy near the ranch for a few nights, but it wasn't enough. Everyone knew where the orders had come from, even if they couldn't prove it. Then Mary Blackwood arrived in Kingman. Dr. Fletcher brought her to the ranch under cover of darkness. She was 32 years old with her father's dark hair and a face marked by years of sorrow. But her eyes were kind, and when she met Eleanor, she took both of her hands. "Thank you," Mary said, "for giving me the courage to do this." They hid Mary at Dr. Fletcher's house, waiting for Sunday. The plan was simple. She would attend church and confront her father publicly, telling the truth about what had happened 10 years ago. But Blackwood learned of her presence. One of his loyal followers saw Mary at Dr. Fletcher's and reported back immediately. Saturday night, Sheriff McGraw appeared at Dr. Fletcher's door with an arrest warrant. "Mary Blackwood, you're under arrest for theft from the church treasury. $500 missing in 1873. "That's absurd," Dr. Fletcher protested. "She took nothing." I have Reverend Blackwood's sworn testimony and church records documenting the missing funds. Mary went pale. He's lying. I never stole anything. You can explain that to the judge. For now, you're coming to the jail. Cole and Eleanor heard about the arrest within the hour. They rushed to the sheriff's office, but McGraw was apologetic and immovable. I have to follow the warrant. If she's innocent, it'll come out in court. There won't be a fair court, Cole said bitterly. Blackwood controls the judge. That night, Eleanor went into labor. It was too early. She was only 7.5 months pregnant. The pains started as a dull ache and built rapidly into something overwhelming. Ruth Morgan came immediately when Cole sent Sam running for help. Dr. Fletcher was dealing with Mary's arrest unreachable at the moment. Eleanor labored through the night, Ruth doing her best to help, but clearly worried. The baby wasn't in the right position. Eleanor was bleeding too much. And Dr. Fletcher, the only person with enough medical knowledge to help, couldn't get away from the jail where Mary was being held. Cole paced outside the bedroom, helpless and terrified. Sam sat with him, the boy's face pale. Is Mrs. Harrison going to die? Sam asked. No, Cole said fiercely. She's strong. She'll make it through this. But he wasn't sure. He'd already lost one wife to circumstances beyond his control. The thought of losing Eleanor and their child was unbearable. Finally, near dawn, Sam volunteered. I'll get her, Fletcher. I'm small. I can sneak into the jail. Sam, no, it's too dangerous. Mrs. Harrison saved me from the fire. I'm going to save her. Before Cole could stop him, the boy was gone, running through the pre-dawn darkness toward town. Cole wanted to chase after him but couldn't leave Eleanor. Inside the bedroom, Eleanor was fading. Ruth had done everything she knew how to do, but it wasn't enough. The baby was coming wrong and Eleanor was losing too much blood. Cole, Eleanor whispered when he came to her side, if you have to choose, save the baby. No, don't talk like that. You're both going to be fine. Promise me, if it comes to it, save our child. Cole couldn't speak. He just held her hand and prayed harder than he'd ever prayed in his life. Sam made it to the jail and convinced Dr. Fletcher to come by climbing through a window and unlocking the door from the inside. It was technically a jailbreak, but the boy argued that saving a life was more important than following unjust rules. Dr. Fletcher arrived just as Eleanor was slipping into unconsciousness. He worked quickly, his old hands steady despite his age. He managed to turn the baby to stop the worst of the bleeding. And as the sun rose over the Arizona Valley, Eleanor Harrison gave birth to a son. Benjamin. They named him Benjamin, and he was tiny and red and perfect. He cried with healthy lungs despite being early, and Eleanor held him with tears streaming down her face. You're both alive, Cole kept saying, like he couldn't quite believe it. You're both alive. Dr. Fletcher was exhausted but smiling. She'll need rest, lots of it. No moving around for at least 2 weeks. But she'll recover. They both will. As word spread of Benjamin's birth, something shifted in Kingman. Even people who had been avoiding the Harrisons sent small gifts. Baby clothes. Food. A cradle that someone left on the porch anonymously. But Mary still sat in jail and Blackwood's charges still hung over her head. The trial was set for the following week. Eleanor, still weak from childbirth, insisted on attending. Cole tried to talk her out of it, but she was immovable. Mary came back to help us. I'm not letting her face Blackwood alone. The courtroom was packed. Judge Wilson, a stern man in his 60s who'd served with Blackwood on the church board for years, presided. Blackwood sat in the front row, his face composed and righteous. Mary stood accused. The evidence seemed damning at first. Blackwood produced church ledgers showing $500 missing the year Mary had left town. He testified under oath that Mary had been the only person with access to the safe. But Thomas Wright had been busy. He'd searched through old records and found something crucial. The church's original ledgers from 1873, stored in a filing cabinet in the basement, showed no missing money at all. The ledgers Blackwood had presented were copies, and they'd been altered. When Thomas presented this evidence, the courtroom erupted. Judge Wilson examined both sets of books, his expression darkening. Reverend Blackwood, can you explain this discrepancy? Blackwood's composure cracked. Those old ledgers must be incomplete. My records are accurate. Your records appear to be fraudulent, the judge said coldly. This is a serious accusation to make against your own daughter. She needed to be stopped, Blackwood said, his voice rising. She was corrupting the town just like that Harrison woman. Someone had to take a stand for morality. By lying under oath, Judge Wilson's voice cut like a whip. By falsifying documents, by destroying your own daughter's reputation. Mary stood up, her voice shaking but clear. I never stole anything. 10 years ago, I made a mistake. I got pregnant outside of marriage. My father didn't show me compassion or help. He sent me away and told everyone I was dead. He's been lying for a decade because he couldn't face the truth, that his daughter was human, that she made a mistake, that his precious reputation was built on hiding reality. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Blackwood stood, his face red. You dare to speak to me this way after everything I did for you? You did nothing for me, Mary said, tears streaming down her face. You cast me out. You told me I was worthless. You made me believe for 10 years that I deserved shame. But I didn't. I deserved love and forgiveness. I deserved a father who would stand by me instead of condemning me to protect his own image. She turned to the courtroom. And now he's doing the same thing to Mrs. Harrison, condemning her for the same sin I committed, trying to drive her out of town because she threatens his control. Eleanor stood, Benjamin cradled in her arms. Reverend Blackwood preaches about morality and righteousness, but when his own daughter needed him, he abandoned her. When I needed compassion, he gave me condemnation. He's not protecting this town. He's protecting his own pride. People in the courtroom began to shift to murmur. Mrs. Patterson, sitting near the front, looked troubled. Mr. Henderson, the school board chairman, was frowning. Dr. Fletcher stood next. I've known Reverend Blackwood for 20 years. I've watched him use fear and judgment to control this town. But true faith isn't about control. It's about grace. It's about forgiveness. It's about standing with people in their weakness, not casting them out. One by one, others stood. Ruth Morgan, Henry, Thomas Wright. Sam, young as he was, climbed onto a bench. Mrs. Harrison saved my life, the boy said. She ran into a burning barn to help me. That's what kind of person she is, and Reverend Blackwood tried to hurt her. The tide had turned. Judge Wilson dismissed all charges against Mary and issued a stern warning to Blackwood about bearing false witness. But the real judgment came from the community. As Blackwood left the courtroom, people turned away from him. The man who had commanded respect for 2 decades found himself facing cold shoulders and averted eyes. His power, built on fear and righteousness, crumbled when exposed to the light of truth. Mrs. Patterson approached Eleanor as people filed out of the courthouse. I was wrong, she said stiffly, about you, about judging you so harshly. What you did for Sam, running into that fire while pregnant, that showed more Christian character than I've demonstrated in years. Eleanor, holding Benjamin close, simply nodded. Thank you. Other apologies followed. The banker who'd refused Cole's loan, the merchants who'd given Cole service. Not everyone changed their minds, but enough did that Eleanor and Cole no longer felt like outcasts. Blackwood resigned from the church the following week. He left Kingman entirely a month later, moving to California to live with a distant cousin. His empire of moral authority had fallen, brought down not by his enemies, but by the truth he'd tried so hard to hide. Mary stayed in Kingman, working with Dr. Fletcher, and eventually taking over much of his practice as he grew older. She and Eleanor became close friends, 2 women who understood the weight of judgment and the freedom of grace. 2 years passed. The house on the ranch was finished, expanded now, with a 2nd bedroom for the children. Benjamin toddled around the property, curious about everything, fearless in the way of small boys. Eleanor was pregnant again, this time with a daughter they would name Margaret. Sam Morgan was 9 years old now, still coming to the ranch almost daily. He'd become like an older brother to Benjamin, teaching him about horses and cattle with all the seriousness of a child playing at adulthood. The ranch prospered. Cole's cattle herd had grown. He'd hired Thomas Wright permanently, and the young man lived in a small cabin on the property. The land produced, the creek never failed, and the valley seemed to bloom with life. On their 2nd anniversary, Cole and Eleanor sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the cottonwoods. Benjamin was asleep inside. Margaret moved in Eleanor's belly-strong kicks that made her gasp. Do you ever think about Boston? Cole asked. Sometimes, but I don't miss it. This is home now. Even with everything we went through, especially because of everything we went through, we built this, Cole, together. We didn't inherit it or have it given to us. We earned it with our own hands and our own courage. Cole pulled her close. I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. You're the strongest person I've ever known. I'm strong because you stand beside me. That's what marriage is supposed to be. Two people making each other better. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. From inside the house came Benjamin's sleepy voice calling for water. Eleanor started to rise, but Cole stopped her. I'll get it. You rest. He returned a few minutes later with their son in his arms. Benjamin's eyes were already drooping again, but he wanted to see the stars. Cole sat back down with the boy in his lap, and Eleanor leaned against his shoulder. Tell me the story. Benjamin said a nightly ritual he'd demanded since learning to talk. What story? Cole asked, though he knew. How you and Mama got married. Eleanor smiled in the darkness. Cole's voice was low and warm as he spoke. Your mama and I fell in love before you were born. But she was scared to tell me about you because she thought I might not want you. So one night she got lost in the desert and I found her. And when she finally told me about you, do you know what I said? What? Benjamin asked, even though he'd heard this story 100 times. I said, I've been hoping you would, because you weren't a mistake or a problem. You were a blessing. You were the answer to my prayers. And then you got married. That very night, in the church just past midnight, and we've been together ever since. Benjamin yawned. I'm glad Mama got lost in the desert. So am I, son. So am I. Cole carried the boy back to bed. When he returned, Eleanor was crying softly. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything's right. That's why I'm crying. Because we're here, we're safe, we're together. Because that night in the desert, I thought my life was ending. And instead it was just beginning. Margaret was born in November, healthy and loud, with her father's green eyes and her mother's dark hair. The birth was easier this time, with Dr. Fletcher and Mary both attending. Sam sat outside with Benjamin, telling the younger boy stories to distract him from the sounds of labor. When Cole brought Benjamin in to meet his sister, the 2-year-old stared at the tiny red-faced creature with suspicion. That's a baby, he announced. That's your sister, Eleanor corrected, laughing. Can we keep her forever? The years rolled on. Benjamin grew tall and serious, learning ranching from his father. Margaret was fierce and clever, demanding Eleanor teach her to read before she was 4 years old. A third child came a boy they named William, quiet and thoughtful with a gift for working with animals. Sam Morgan grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over his family's ranch when Ruth grew too old to manage it. He married a girl from a neighboring property, and their children played with the Harrison children, continuing the bond between families. Mary Blackwood became one of the most respected people in Kingman. Her medical skill saved countless lives, and her gentle compassion made her beloved. She never married, claiming that her work and her friendships were family enough. Dr. Fletcher passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. The whole town mourned him. At his funeral, Eleanor spoke about how he had stood with them when no one else would, how his courage had made their life possible. Thomas Wright married and built his own ranch with Cole's help. He named his first son after Cole, a gesture that brought tears to the older man's eyes. The Harrisons became pillars of the community. Cole served on the town council. Eleanor opened a small school on their ranch, teaching children from across the valley. Their home was always full of people, laughter, life. On their 10th anniversary, Cole gave Eleanor a gift. It was the marriage certificate from their midnight wedding, framed and preserved. So we never forget where we started, he said. Eleanor traced the signatures with her finger. I could never forget. That night changed everything. Do you have any regrets? She looked around their home. Benjamin was 9 now, a serious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ranch work with quiet determination. Margaret at 7 was already demanding books and lessons beyond her years. William at 6 had a gift for gentle patience with every creature on the ranch. The house was warm and solid, built with their own hands. The land produced, the cattle thrived, and their community had grown to respect and love them. Not a single one, Eleanor said. Every choice, every hardship, every moment of fear, it all led to this. How could I regret anything that brought me here? The years continued to pass. Benjamin married a rancher's daughter and built a house on the southern section of the property. Margaret went east to study medicine, then returned to practice alongside Mary. William took over the day-to-day running of the ranch his patient way, with animals making the herd prosper. Cole's hair went silver. Eleanor's dark locks showed streaks of white. But they still sat on the porch most evenings, watching the sunset over their valley, holding hands like newlyweds. When they celebrated their 25th anniversary, the whole valley came to celebrate. The ranch house couldn't hold everyone, so they set up tables outside under the cottonwood trees. 4 generations gathered, children and grandchildren, old friends and new. Sam Morgan, now in his 30s with children of his own, stood to make a toast. 25 years ago, Mrs. Harrison saved my life by running into a burning barn. But the truth is, she and Mr. Harrison saved this whole community. They showed us that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified. They taught us that love is stronger than judgment, that grace is more powerful than condemnation. Everything good that's happened in Kingman over the past quarter century started with them refusing to give up. The crowd raised their glasses. Cole and Eleanor stood together, his arm around her waist, and Eleanor felt overwhelmed by gratitude. That night, after everyone had gone home and the grandchildren were asleep in various bedrooms, Cole and Eleanor walked out to the spot where the house had first begun to take shape 25 years ago. "Remember when this was just a foundation and a dream?" Eleanor asked. "I remember thinking it would never be finished, that we'd never make it work. But we did. We did." He pulled her close. "You know what the secret was?" "What?" "That night in the desert when you told me you were pregnant and I said I'd been hoping you would. I meant it. I'd been praying for a reason to ask you to marry me, for proof that you needed me as much as I needed you. And when you told me about the baby, it felt like God saying, 'Here's your chance, don't waste it.'" Eleanor leaned her head against his chest. "I was so afraid. I thought you'd be angry or ashamed. I was grateful. I was blessed. I was terrified of losing you. You never will. Not in this life or the next." They stood in silence for a long moment, listening to the creek, the wind in the cottonwoods, the peaceful sounds of their land. "Do you think we did right?" Eleanor asked. "By our children, by the community? I think we did the best we could, and looking at how they've turned out, I'd say our best was good enough." More years passed. Cole and Eleanor grew old together on the ranch they'd built. They watched their grandchildren grow, saw their children prosper, witnessed the valley transform from a collection of struggling homesteads into a thriving community. Eleanor wrote their story down in a leather-bound journal, every detail from that night in the desert to the life they'd built together. She wanted their descendants to know where they'd come from, what it had cost, why it mattered. On their 50th anniversary, too old now to host a large gathering, they sat on their porch with just their immediate family: 3 children, 8 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. Benjamin read from his mother's journal the story of that midnight wedding, the fight against Blackwood, the fire and the birth, and all the moments that had shaped their family. When he finished, young Sam Morgan, the grandson of their old friend, asked a question. "Great-Grandpa Cole, why did you say 'I've been hoping you would' when Great-Grandma told you about the baby? Weren't you scared?" Cole looked at Eleanor, her face lined with age but still beautiful to him. "I was terrified," he admitted, "but not of the baby or the responsibility. I was terrified of losing her, of her deciding I wasn't good enough or that she didn't need me. When she told me she was pregnant, it meant she couldn't walk away. It meant we were bound together. And that's all I'd wanted since the first moment I saw her." "But you could have been angry," the boy persisted. "You could have blamed her." "I could have, but that would have made me a fool. She was offering me everything I'd ever wanted: a family, a purpose, a reason to build something lasting. Why would I throw that away because the timing wasn't conventional?" Eleanor took his hand. "Your great-grandfather taught me something important. Worth isn't about what other people think. It's about the choices you make when things get hard. Anyone can be good when life is easy. Character shows when you're tested." The children and grandchildren absorbed this wisdom, filing it away to pass on to their own descendants. As the sun set on that golden anniversary, Cole and Eleanor sat alone again, as they had so many thousands of times before. "We did good, didn't we?" Eleanor said softly. "We did better than good. We built something that'll last long after we're gone. I love you, Cole Harrison. I loved you that night in the desert. I loved you through every hard moment. I love you now. I love you too. More every day. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat in peaceful silence, watching the last silhouette fade from the sky. The valley spread out before them, green and prosperous, filled with their legacy. Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 years later at the age of 82. Eleanor held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering that she'd see him again soon. She lived another 2 years without him, surrounded by family, but missing him every moment. She spent her final days in the house they'd built together, looking out at the valley they'd made their own. On a clear spring morning, Eleanor Rose Harrison passed quietly into whatever comes next. Her children were with her. Her last words were simple. "Tell him I'm coming. Tell Cole I'm coming home." They buried her beside Cole on the hill overlooking the ranch beneath the cottonwood trees where they'd sat together so many times. The headstone was simple granite with both their names and dates and below a single line that captured everything. He hoped, she trusted. Together, they built forever. The ranch continued through the generations. Benjamin's children and grandchildren worked the land, maintained the house, kept the story alive. The valley prospered, and the Harrison name became synonymous with integrity, hard work, and the kind of love that endures. Every few years, the family would gather at the ranch for a reunion. They'd sit under the cottonwood trees, and someone would read from Eleanor's journal, reminding them all where they'd come from. The story of that night in the desert became family legend, the tale of the cowboy who said, "I've been hoping you would," when the woman he loved confessed her greatest fear. The midnight wedding, the battle against Blackwood, the fire and the birth, and the life built from courage and determination. New generations learned that worth is earned through character, not given through circumstance. That love is a choice you make every day, especially on the hard days. That standing up for what's right matters more than social approval. That grace is more powerful than judgment. And on quiet evenings when the sun set over the Arizona Valley and the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, it was easy to imagine two figures sitting on that old porch. An old cowboy and his wife, hands joined, watching over the legacy they'd built together. A legacy not of wealth or power, but of love, courage, and the stubborn refusal to give up on what mattered most. A legacy that proves sometimes the thing we fear revealing most is exactly what the other person has been hoping to hear. And that made all the difference.